You did what? I heard my own voice crack through the phone, my chest tightening with a panic I could not contain. My mother laughed on the other end of the line, that dismissive chuckle she always used when she thought I was being dramatic. Relax, Jasmine. We gave your spare key to Felicity. She needed a reliable car, and yours was just sitting there in the parking lot. I stood in the empty parking spot where my brand new Honda Accord had been sitting just 12 hours ago. The concrete was still wet from the morning dew, and I could see the faint tire marks where someone had backed out quickly, carelessly. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. Mom, that car is in my name. I have been making payments on it for 3 months. You cannot just give someone my keys without asking me first. She is your sister, my mother said, as if that explained everything. Family helps, family. You know, Felicity has been going through a hard time since her divorce. She needed transportation to get to her new job, and you have that nice new car just sitting there. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe. Felicity. Of course it was Felicity, my older sister, who had crashed 4 cars in the last 5 years. My sister, who had totaled our father's truck running a red light because she was changing the radio station. Who had wrapped her ex-husband's sedan around a telephone pole after drinking at a party and swearing she was fine to drive. Who had driven her own leased vehicle into a ditch because she was texting and forgot the road curved. Who had rear-ended a school bus, thankfully empty, because she was applying mascara at a stoplight. Mom, Felicity has destroyed every car she has ever touched. She has the worst driving record of anyone I know. That is not fair, Jasmine. Those were accidents. Anyone can have an accident. 4 accidents in 5 years is not bad luck. It is a pattern. It is negligence. And now you have given her my car without even telling me. My mother's voice hardened, taking on that edge I knew so well. You have always been jealous of your sister. Ever since you were children, you could not stand to see her have anything nice. You always had to compete with her. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Me, jealous of Felicity. I had worked 2 jobs through college, while she dropped out after 1 semester to pursue a modeling career that never materialized. I had saved for years to afford the down payment on this car while she burned through 3 marriages and twice as many credit cards. I had built my life carefully, brick by brick, while she demolished everything in her path and expected someone else to clean up the rubble. Mom, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Where did Felicity take my car? I do not know exactly. Probably to work. She said something about a new position at a salon in Worthington. You should be happy for her, Jasmine. She is finally getting her life together. When did she take it? Last night around 11. Your father met her at your apartment complex and gave her the spare key. We thought you would be asleep, and we did not want to wake you. We were trying to be considerate. They had come to my apartment in the middle of the night and handed over my property without even knocking on my door to ask permission. The betrayal of it settled into my bones like ice water, spreading through my entire body until I felt numb. Mom, I am going to give you a minute to understand what you have done. You and Dad came to my home, gave away my car without my permission, and did not even tell me until I called in a panic because I thought it had been stolen by a stranger. It was not stolen, Jasmine. It is with family. That is completely different. It was taken without my consent. That is the definition of stolen. My mother scoffed, and I could picture her rolling her eyes. You are being ridiculous and dramatic as usual. Your sister will bring it back when she is done with it. A week, maybe 2 at most. When she is done with it? It is not a library book, Mom. It is a $28,000 vehicle that I am still paying off. I have car payments. I have insurance. I need that car to get to work. Money, money, money. That is all you ever think about, Jasmine. Family comes before money. Family comes before everything. I felt something shift inside me. a wall I had spent 29 years building brick by careful brick to protect myself from the reality of who my family actually was. And in that moment, standing in an empty parking space with the Columbus morning traffic rushing past and the cold October air biting at my cheeks, I felt the first crack appear in that wall. "All right," I said quietly. "Just give me a minute." I hung up before she could respond. "My name is Jasmine, and I am 29 years old. I work as an operations manager at Crestwell Electric, a mid-sized electrical supply company on the east side of Columbus, Ohio. I have lived in this city my entire life, watched it grow and change around me, while I tried desperately to grow and change myself into someone my family might finally respect." I stood in that empty parking spot for a long moment staring at my phone. Then I opened my contacts, scrolled past my mother's name, past my father's, past Felicity, and found the number I never thought I would actually dial. I called the police. The officer who arrived was a woman about my age with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. Her name was Officer Bradley, and she listened to my story with the patience of someone who had heard variations of it 100 times before, but still gave each case her full attention. "So, let me make sure I understand the situation," she said, her pen poised over her notepad. "Your parents entered your apartment complex last night, gave your spare key to your sister, and she drove away in your vehicle without your knowledge or consent." "That is correct." "And you are the sole owner of this vehicle? Your name is on the title and registration, not anyone else's?" "Yes. I bought it 3 months ago from a dealership in Dublin. I still have all the paperwork inside my apartment." Officer Bradley nodded and made a note. "And you did not give anyone permission to take your car? Not your parents? Not your sister? Not anyone?" "No. I did not even know it was gone until I walked outside this morning to go to work. I thought it had been stolen by a stranger. I never imagined my own family would do something like this." She wrote something else in her notepad, then looked up at me with a serious expression. "I have to ask you this directly, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Are you certain you want to file a report? Once this is in the system, it is in the system. Your sister will be flagged for vehicle theft, and that is not something that can be easily undone." I thought about my mother's voice on the phone, that condescending laugh. I thought about all the times I had covered for Felicity, made excuses for her, cleaned up her messes because that was what good sisters did. I thought about the car payments I would still owe, even if Felicity crashed this vehicle like she had crashed all the others. I thought about the years of being treated like the backup plan while Felicity was the star. "I am certain." Officer Bradley nodded, her expression professional but not unkind. "All right. I am going to start filling out the official report. This will take a few minutes." As she worked, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call from my mother. Voicemail again. Then a text message from Felicity herself. The first communication I had received from her in months. "Heard you are freaking out about the car. Chill out. I am just borrowing it for the week. I will bring it back on Sunday. Stop being so dramatic." I showed the text to Officer Bradley, who raised an eyebrow as she read it. "She texted you admitting she has the car. Apparently she thinks this is just a misunderstanding. She thinks I am overreacting. Well, this will make things easier from an evidentiary standpoint." Officer Bradley took a photo of my screen with her own phone. "I am going to enter this into the system now. Your vehicle will be flagged as stolen, and any officer who runs the plates will be alerted immediately. If your sister is driving it, she will be stopped." Part of me expected to feel guilty. Part of me expected the familiar wave of anxiety that always came when I did something that might upset my family. That sick feeling in my stomach that had controlled my decisions for as long as I could remember. But instead, I felt something else entirely. Something that felt almost like relief, like setting down a heavy bag I had been carrying for miles without realizing how much it weighed. My phone rang again. This time it was Felicity calling directly, and after a moment of hesitation, I answered. Jasmine, what the hell is wrong with you? My sister's voice was sharp with annoyance, the same tone she used when anyone dared to inconvenience her. Mom said you were acting crazy about the car. It is just a car. I needed it for work, and you were not using it in the middle of the night. You took my car without asking me, Felicity. You did not call. You did not text. You just took it. I did ask. I asked Mom and Dad, and they said it would be fine. They said you would understand, because you are always so understanding about everything. They do not own my car, Felicity. They cannot give permission for something that is not theirs to give. God, you are so uptight. This is exactly why nobody likes you. You know that? You are always so obsessed with rules and fairness and making sure everything is exactly right. Meanwhile, I am actually trying to get my life together, and you cannot even let me borrow a stupid car for 1 week. Officer Bradley was watching me with a carefully neutral expression. I realized she could probably hear every word my sister was saying through the phone. Felicity, where are you right now? None of your business. I will bring the car back when I am ready and not a minute before. That car is currently registered as stolen with the Columbus Police Department. If you are driving it and you get pulled over for any reason, you will be arrested on the spot. There was a pause. Then Felicity laughed. That same dismissive sound my mother always made. You are bluffing. You would never actually call the cops on your own sister. You do not have the guts. I already did. The officer is standing right next to me as we speak. The line went silent. I could almost hear the gears turning in my sister's head as she tried to calculate whether I was telling the truth or running some kind of elaborate bluff. You are lying. I am not. Another pause stretched between us, longer this time. Then Felicity's voice changed, becoming harder and uglier than I had ever heard it. You are such a Jasmine. You know that? You have always been jealous of me, and now you are trying to ruin my life because I finally have a chance at something good. You cannot stand to see me succeed. I am trying to get my car back. That is all I want. This is not about the car, and you know it. This is about you wanting to control everything. You cannot stand that Mom and Dad love me more than you. You have always resented that. I felt the words land, felt them try to burrow into the soft places where old wounds still festered. But something had changed this morning. Something had shifted when I saw that empty parking space and realized my family had violated my trust so casually, so completely, without even a moment of hesitation or guilt. Felicity, I do not care if Mom and Dad love you more. I stopped caring about that years ago. I care that you stole my car. I did not steal it. They gave me the key, a key they had no right to give. Look, I do not want to argue with you about semantics. Just bring the car back to my apartment and we can sort this out without police involvement. No. Well, I need it for work. You can take the bus or get a ride or something. Figure it out. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. All right then. I will see you when the police find you. I hung up before she could respond. Officer Bradley was still watching me, her notepad closed now. She is not going to bring it back voluntarily, is she? No. She thinks I am bluffing. She thinks I will back down like I always do. We will put out a bulletin with the vehicle description, the make, model, color, and plate number. It should not take long to locate. Columbus is a big city, but there are only so many places to hide. I nodded, feeling strangely calm now that the decision had been made. What happens when you find her? Depends on the circumstances. If she is driving, she will be pulled over and detained. If the vehicle is parked somewhere, we will impound it and notify you. Either way, she will have to answer for taking your property without permission. The call came 4 hours later. I was sitting at my desk at Crestwell Electric, trying to focus on inventory reports while my phone sat silent beside me. My coworker, Denise, had noticed something was wrong the moment I walked in that morning, and she had brought me coffee without asking, which was more kindness than my actual family had shown me in years. "You look like someone ran over your dog," she had said. "What happened?" "Family drama. I do not want to talk about it yet." She had nodded and given my shoulder a sympathetic squeeze before returning to her own desk. Denise understood boundaries. She understood that sometimes people needed space to process things before they were ready to share. My family had never understood that about me. When my phone finally rang and I saw Officer Bradley's number, I stood up so fast I knocked over the coffee cup, sending lukewarm liquid spreading across my desk. "Jasmine, this is Officer Bradley. We found your vehicle. Where is it? Is Felicity with it?" There was a pause that told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. "The car is at an impound lot on the west side of the city. It was abandoned in a no-parking zone about 3 hours ago. Looks like your sister left it when she realized we were actively looking for it. What condition is it in?" Another pause. Longer this time. "You should probably come see it yourself." Those 6 words. "You should probably come see it yourself." Or in the history of bad phone calls, nothing good has ever followed a sentence like that. No one has ever said you should probably come see it yourself and then handed you a trophy. I grabbed my keys, the spare set from my desk drawer, and told Denise I had an emergency. She looked at my face and nodded without asking a single question. That woman had more emotional intelligence in her left pinky than my entire family combined. The impound lot on the west side of Columbus was a gray, chain-link fenced compound that smelled like motor oil and bad decisions. Officer Bradley was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance with 2 other officers I did not recognize. She greeted me with a handshake that was firmer than the situation probably required, like she was bracing me for something. "Thank you for coming quickly," she said. "The vehicle is in Bay 4. I want to prepare you before we walk back there." "How bad is it?" I asked. She did not answer immediately, which was its own answer. We walked through the lot in silence. I counted the seconds between each footstep, trying to stay calm, trying to breathe the way my therapist had taught me when anxiety started climbing up through my chest. In through the nose, 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out through the mouth, 4 counts. And then I saw it. My beautiful, brand new 3-month-old Honda Accord. The car I had saved for 2 years to afford. The car I had researched for 6 months before buying. The car I had driven exactly 4,200 miles on, still in that period where everything smells new, and the sound system feels like a miracle, and every drive feels like something you earned. The front left bumper was crumpled inward like a soda can someone had stomped on. The driver's side mirror was hanging by a wire. There was a long, deep scrape running from the back door all the way to the trunk, like someone had sideswiped a concrete wall or maybe a parking structure pillar. The passenger side front tire was completely flat, sitting on the rim, and through the window, I could see the interior. Empty fast food bags on the back seat. 2 pairs of shoes that were not mine. A man's jacket thrown across the headrest. Several receipts scattered across the dashboard. A half-empty bottle of something that was definitely not water. I stood there for a long moment. Completely still. Completely silent. "Jasmine." Officer Bradley's voice was quiet. "Take your time." How did the bumper get like that? My voice was very calm, dangerously calm. Based on the damage pattern, it looks like she hit something head-on at low speed. A curb, a parking barrier, maybe another vehicle. We have not identified a secondary scene yet. And she just left it? She just parked it in a no-parking zone and walked away? A patrol officer spotted it about 3 hours after it was abandoned. There was no sign of your sister. She was likely picked up by someone else. I turned and looked at Officer Bradley directly. She panicked when I told her the car was flagged. She drove it somewhere, hit something, and then she got scared and called someone to come get her. That is our working theory, yes. I exhaled slowly. Then I walked to the passenger window and looked at the receipts on the dashboard without touching anything. Gas station receipt, a toll booth printout, and one from a hotel in Atlantic City, New Jersey, dated last night. For 2 nights. Paid with a credit card. I stepped back. She was not going to work. Officer Bradley came to stand beside me and looked at the receipt through the glass. Her jaw tightened slightly. We will need that as evidence. The officers will photograph and document everything before the vehicle is released to you. She told my mother she needed the car to get to her new job at a salon. She told my mother she was a responsible adult finally getting her life together. I heard my own voice and realized I was not angry anymore. I was something past anger. Something cold and clear, like water at the bottom of a very deep well. She stole my car to drive to Atlantic City for a weekend trip with her boyfriend. That does appear to be the case. I pulled out my phone, and then it buzzed. A text from my mother. Jasmine, your father and I are very upset with you right now. What you are doing to your sister is unforgivable. She called us crying. She said the police are looking for her like she is a criminal. You need to drop this nonsense immediately and remember that family is more important than a car. Call us when you are ready to act like a grown woman. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I showed it to Officer Bradley. She read it. Then she handed my phone back with an expression I could not quite name. Something between professional neutrality and genuine human sympathy. I would save that message, she said. I already did, I replied. The insurance adjuster came to the impound lot the following morning. His name was Mr. Petrov, a compact, our precise man in his mid-50s, who carried a clipboard and spoke with the clipped efficiency of someone who had seen every possible way a human being could destroy an automobile and had long since stopped being surprised by any of them. He walked around my car 3 times in complete silence, photographing every angle, kneeling down to examine the undercarriage, running his fingers along the scrape on the door panel like a doctor reading a wound. When he finally came to stand beside me, his expression remained neutral. The damage is significant, but not catastrophic. The bumper assembly will need full replacement. The mirror is a write-off. The door panel will require repainting to match the original color. The tire is a replacement, and we will need to inspect the rim for structural integrity. There may also be alignment issues from whatever caused the front-end damage. What is the total estimate? I asked. He consulted his clipboard. Preliminary figure is between $7,000 and $9,000. $7,000 to $9,000. On a car I had owned for 3 months. On a car I was still paying $487 a month on. I pressed my lips together and breathed through my nose. Given the police report and the circumstances, this will be filed as a theft claim. Your comprehensive coverage will cover the repairs, minus your deductible. You have a $500 deductible on this policy, so I pay $500 to repair the car my sister stole. He looked at me with a brief, entirely professional compassion. I understand that is frustrating. However, your policy does cover theft damage. We can also pursue subrogation against the responsible party if they have assets or coverage that can be claimed. She does not have coverage. She cannot get coverage. She has had 4 accidents in 5 years. He made a note on his clipboard. We will explore all available options. I drove a rental car home that evening, a compact economy vehicle that smelled like someone else's perfume and rattled slightly when I accelerated past 50 miles per hour. I sat in the parking lot of my apartment complex for 20 minutes before going inside, just sitting in the dark with the engine off, processing everything. My phone had 42 missed calls and text messages. My mother, my father, Felicity, my Aunt Patricia, who always served as the family's unofficial mediator. I did not call any of them back. Instead, I called my attorney. Now, I know some of you are thinking, your attorney? Who just has an attorney on speed dial? But 3 years earlier, I had a dispute with a contractor who had done shoddy work on my apartment and refused to refund my deposit. And a coworker had referred me to a woman named Ms. Hartley, who handled small civil matters at reasonable rates. I had kept her number. I had never imagined I would use it for something like this. But here we were. Ms. Hartley listened to the entire story without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief pause on the line. "You filed the police report the morning the vehicle was taken?" "Yes. I have the report number." "You have documentation of the insurance damage estimate?" "The adjuster emailed it to me an hour ago." "You have screenshots of all the text messages from your sister and your mother?" Time-stamped and backed up to my cloud storage. Another brief pause. "Jasmine, you have done everything exactly right. I want you to send me all of those documents tonight. Your sister is looking at criminal charges for unauthorized use of a vehicle, potentially criminal damage to property, depending on how the damage is characterized. Civilly, you have a strong claim for the full cost of repairs, your deductible, any rental costs, and potentially damages for the diminished value of the vehicle." When I hung up, I felt something I had not felt in years: control. Not the anxious, hypervigilant control I had practiced my entire life, always scanning for the next crisis, always bracing for the next way my family would upend something I had carefully built. This was different. This was the clean, quiet kind of control that comes from having done everything correctly and knowing that the truth is entirely on your side. I made a cup of tea. I sat down at my kitchen table. And for the first time since I had walked outside that morning and found an empty parking space, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Not just the car, not just the damage, but the fact that my parents had stood in my parking lot at 11 o'clock at night and handed over my property to someone they knew had a history of destroying things. And they had not knocked on my door. They had done it deliberately, in the dark, while I was sleeping, because they knew I would say no if they asked. They had made the decision that their convenience, their peacekeeping, their management of Felicity's chaos was worth more than my consent. And that was not a mistake. That was a choice. And I was going to let the legal system communicate my response on my behalf. 2 days after filing the insurance claim and consulting with Ms. Hartley, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was my Aunt Patricia. Now, if you do not have an Aunt Patricia in your family, let me describe her to you. She is the person who is always calm, always measured, always the one sitting in the middle of the chaos saying, "Now let us all just take a breath and talk about this like adults." She genuinely believed that every family conflict could be resolved with enough patience, enough compromise, and a good enough casserole. She had mediated disputes between my parents and their siblings for 30 years and considered herself a voice of reason. She called me on a Wednesday morning and said, "Jasmine, your grandmother would like everyone to come to dinner on Saturday. The whole family. Your mother and father, you, and Felicity. She says she is too old to watch her grandchildren tear themselves apart over a misunderstanding, and she wants to sit everyone down and talk." A misunderstanding. That word landed in my chest, like a stone dropping into still water. A misunderstanding is when two people interpret the same event differently. What happened here was not ambiguous. My sister took my car. She took it to Atlantic City. She damaged it. She abandoned it. There was no interpretation. There was only the fact. But I said, "All right, I will come." Because here is what I had learned by that point. When your family calls a meeting to pressure you into backing down, the worst thing you can do is refuse to attend. Refusing to attend lets them tell the story without you in the room. It lets them paint you as the difficult one, the dramatic one, the one who would not even sit down and try to work things out. No, I would sit down. I would be perfectly calm, and I would let the truth do the work. And before I tell you what happened at that dinner, because I promise you, it is something, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button. My own mother told me stories like this would never reach 1,000 subscribers. She said nobody cares about regular people's problems. She said I was wasting my time. So if you believe real stories deserve to be heard, that ordinary people going through extraordinary betrayals deserve a platform, prove her wrong with me. Subscribe, like this video, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had family take something from you and then act like you were the problem? This comment section is about to become a community, and I am here for every single one of your stories. All right, back to Saturday dinner. My grandmother's house smelled the same way it had smelled my entire life. Lemon cleaner and cinnamon and something always simmering on the stove. She was 81 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only person in our family that both Felicity and I had ever genuinely feared disappointing. She held both my hands in hers and looked at my face the way she always had, like she was reading something written just below the surface of my skin. "You look tired," she said. "I am tired," I said. "Come sit with me before the others get here." We sat in her kitchen, and I told her everything. Not the version I had given Officer Bradley, clinical and factual. Not the version I had given Ms. Hartley, careful and legally precise. The real version. The version where I admitted that I had not slept properly in 3 days. Where I admitted that the part that hurt most was not the car. The car could be fixed. Insurance existed for exactly this reason. What hurt most was standing in that parking lot, realizing my parents had decided that the path of least resistance with Felicity was worth more than my right to be asked. My grandmother listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not offer perspective. She just listened, the way people listened before everyone decided that conversations are just gaps between their own opinions. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Your sister called me 4 times this week. What did she say?" "She said you were trying to ruin her life, that you had always been jealous of her, that you never wanted to see her succeed." My grandmother's voice was completely flat. "She said you called the police because you wanted to hurt her, not because you were protecting your property. Then I called your father and asked him to tell me exactly what happened, step by step, and when he finished, I asked him one question." "What question?" I asked. I asked him, "Did you knock on Jasmine's door before you gave away her car?" My grandmother looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Something ancient and regretful. He said no. He said they did not want to wake you. She paused. I told him that was the only answer I needed. We heard the front door open, voices in the hallway. My parents, my Aunt Patricia, and Felicity. I picked up my tea and held it with both hands and breathed. They came into the kitchen all at once, the way my family always moved, filling the space immediately, talking over each other, already in the middle of conversations I had not been part of. My mother kissed my grandmother on the cheek and gave me a brief, tight look that conveyed disappointment without saying a single word. My father would not meet my eyes. Aunt Patricia touched my arm gently as she passed, and Felicity walked in last. She looked, and I say this without satisfaction, because this is not a story about wanting to see someone suffer. She looked terrible. She had always been the beautiful one, the one who could walk into a room and demand attention without trying. But she had dark circles under her eyes that her makeup was not quite covering, and her mouth was pressed into a thin, hard line, and she carried herself with the brittle energy of someone who had been telling a story so many times she had started to believe it herself. She did not look at me when she walked in. She walked directly to my grandmother and hugged her for a long time. My grandmother patted her back twice, and then gently pulled away. We sat down at the dinner table. My grandmother had cooked pot roast and roasted vegetables and cornbread, and the kind of meal that felt like an act of love and an act of control simultaneously, because when she cooked for a family meeting, it meant she was the one holding the space, and everyone understood that implicitly. For about 15 minutes, We talked about nothing. Weather. My grandmother's garden. My Aunt Patricia's recent vacation. The careful, practiced small talk of a family that knows a difficult conversation is coming and is collectively delaying it. Then my grandmother set down her fork and folded her hands on the table and said, "All right, let us talk about what happened." The silence that followed lasted approximately 3 seconds before my mother said, "What happened is that Jasmine overreacted to a family situation and involved the police in something that should have been handled privately, and now her sister has a record and—" "I would like to hear from Jasmine first," my grandmother said. Not loudly, but with the quiet finality of someone who had raised 4 children and was not remotely intimidated by anyone at the table. My mother closed her mouth. I spoke calmly. I said, "The car was mine. The payments were mine. Nobody asked me. Nobody knocked on my door. I discovered it was gone when I walked outside to go to work and found an empty parking space. I called the police because I thought it had been stolen by a stranger, and the police told me it had been given away by my own parents. I have a legal and financial responsibility for that vehicle regardless of who is driving it, and I had every right to report it." Then I opened my folder. I had printed everything: the police report, the insurance adjuster's estimate, photos of the damage, the hotel receipt from Atlantic City, screenshots of Felicity's text messages, my mother's text messages, and the call log showing both of them contacting me after I'd already filed the report. I placed them in the center of the table. "The car was taken to Atlantic City," I said. "Not to a job at a salon, to a hotel, for a weekend, with her boyfriend." The silence that followed was different from the polite silence before dinner. This one had texture. It had weight. I watched my mother's face. I watched the exact moment she registered what the hotel receipt meant. The moment she understood that she had defended, passionately and completely, a story that was not true. Felicity said nothing. She was looking at her plate. My father cleared his throat. "Now, Jasmine, even if her plans changed—" "Her plans did not change, Dad. She did not have a job. There was no salon in Worthington. She told you what she needed to tell you to get the keys." My Aunt Patricia had picked up the hotel receipt and was reading it quietly. She set it down without a word. My grandmother looked at Felicity. Just looked at her. Said nothing. Felicity finally looked up. Her eyes were bright with the beginning of tears. "I was going to come back," she said. "It was only going to be 2 days, and then I was going to come back and nobody would have even known. But something happened to the car," I said, "and instead of calling me, instead of being honest, you abandoned it in a no-parking zone and got someone to come pick you up, and my car sat there for 3 hours before a police officer found it. I panicked. You panicked because I had already reported it stolen. If I had not done that, you would have come back Sunday night with a damaged car and some excuse, and the expectation that I would absorb the cost of repairing it because that is what I have always done. I kept my voice even, level. I have always been the one who absorbs the cost, who takes the hit, who cleans up the mess and does not say anything because saying something means I am dramatic or jealous or difficult." "That is not fair," my mother said. "Which part is not fair? The police report? The legal claim? Or the fact that I am sitting here saying this out loud, instead of smiling and pretending everything is fine?" My grandmother spoke. "Linda." She used my mother's name. "You went to her parking lot at 11 o'clock at night and gave away her car without knocking on her door. We thought she was asleep." "That is worse," my grandmother said simply. "You knew she would say no, so you went when she could not say no." My mother's mouth opened. Then it closed. The table was very quiet. The dinner ended without a resolution. That is not a story failure. That is just reality. Family conflicts do not usually resolve over pot roast. People do not have cinematic epiphanies at the dinner table and then hug it out and agree to be better. What actually happens is more complicated and slower and messier than that. What happened was this, Felicity cried. Real tears, I believe. Not performance, or at least not entirely. She cried and admitted that there was no salon job, that she had met someone new and wanted to go on a trip, and did not have a reliable car and made an impulsive decision she had not fully thought through. She said she was sorry. She said she knew it was wrong. My mother did not apologize. She retreated into a kind of wounded silence, the posture she adopted whenever the evidence made her position untenable, but her pride would not allow her to say so out loud. My father looked older than I had ever seen him. He sat very still for most of the conversation. And when it was over, he came to find me in the kitchen while I was helping clear the dishes, and he said quietly, "I should have knocked on your door." That was all. 4 words. But they were honest, and from my father, honest was rarer and worth more than elaborate. I nodded. I did not say you are forgiven, because I was not there yet, and I was not willing to perform a forgiveness I had not earned my way to. Aunt Patricia walked me to my rental car when the evening was over. We stood in the cold driveway for a moment and she said, "I did not know about the hotel receipt. Your mother called me the day after it happened and told me Felicity had borrowed your car and you had reacted very badly. That was the whole story I was given. That is the only version she knows how to tell," I said. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "You have always been the one who holds the line," she said. "In this family, you have always been the one who says, 'This is not acceptable.' And they have always punished you for it by calling it jealousy or rigidity or drama. I think they call it that because it is easier than looking at themselves. For what it is worth," she said, "I think you did the right thing, every part of it." She squeezed my arm. "Do not back down." I drove back to my apartment in the rattling rental car and cried for about 20 minutes in my parking lot. Not from sadness, exactly. From something more like release. The way you sometimes cry after you have been holding your breath for a long time, and finally, you are allowed to breathe. The legal process moved more slowly than the emotional one. Ms. Hartley filed a civil claim against Felicity for the full cost of the damages. The $7,400 that the final repair estimate came out to, plus my $500 deductible, plus the 2-week cost of the rental car at $620. Total claim, $8,520. Felicity's response, delivered through a friend who had apparently given her some basic legal advice, was that she could not pay because she did not have the money. Ms. Hartley had anticipated this. She filed the claim anyway, and we went to court. I want to tell you something about going to court that nobody tells you before you do it for the first time. It is not dramatic. It does not look like television. The judge is not particularly interested in the emotional dimensions of what happened. She does not care that my sister and I had a complicated relationship, or that my parents made a bad judgment call, or that anyone's feelings were hurt. She cares about the law and the facts and the documentation, and we had all of those. Felicity showed up to the hearing in a blazer I recognized from my mother's closet. She had hired a friend's boyfriend to represent her, a man who had apparently passed the bar exam once, but spent most of the hearing shuffling papers and saying my client acknowledges the situation in a way that made me genuinely uncertain what he was acknowledging. I sat next to Miss Hartley and said nothing unless directly asked a question. The judge reviewed the police report. She reviewed the insurance documents. She reviewed the hotel receipt and the text messages. She looked at photographs of my car in the impound lot. She listened to a brief statement from Officer Bradley, who testified by phone. And then she looked at Felicity's attorney and said, "Is there any dispute that the vehicle was taken without the plaintiff's knowledge or consent?" There was a long pause. "My client acknowledges the situation was handled poorly," the attorney said. "That is not what I asked," the judge said. Another pause. "No dispute," he finally said. The judgment was entered in my favor for the full amount. $8,520. Felicity had 90 days to pay. When we walked out of the courthouse into the cold November air, Ms. Hartley was already talking about payment enforcement options if Felicity did not comply within the 90-day window. She was practical and efficient, and already 3 steps ahead. But I had stopped walking. I was standing on the courthouse steps, looking out at the street, at the ordinary Tuesday morning traffic of Columbus, Ohio, people going to work and going to lunch, and living the unremarkable daily life of a city that had no idea what had just happened inside one of its courtrooms. And I felt something settle inside me, something that had been off balance for weeks, maybe for years, finally finding its level. Felicity paid, not in 90 days. It took her 112 days, and it came in 2 partial payments followed by a final lump sum after Ms. Hartley sent her a formal notice of intent to enforce the judgment through wage garnishment. But she paid, every dollar. I do not know where the money came from. I did not ask. That was not my concern. My concern was my car and my deductible and my rental costs, and all of those were made whole. My car came out of the shop looking better than it had before the incident, which sounds impossible, but apparently the body shop matched the paint so precisely that they touched up an unrelated small scratch I had put on the door handle in week 1. I drove it home on a Thursday afternoon in early December, with the heat on full blast and the music up, and I cried again, which I was getting very comfortable with at this point. Crying is not weakness, by the way. I have come to believe that. Crying is just the body saying, I felt something real, and I am not going to pretend I did not. My relationship with my parents entered a new phase that I would describe as respectful distance. We still talk. I still see them. Oh, I am not estranged. But the dynamic shifted in a way that both of us recognized, and neither of us fully named out loud. I stopped being the person who absorbs. I stopped performing the role of the understanding one, the flexible one, the one who would give things up without being asked because she understood that family meant sacrifice. I did not stop loving them, but I stopped pretending that love is the same as obligation. My mother made one attempt, about 3 weeks after the judgment, to bring up the whole thing in a phone call. She said she hoped I was not still carrying resentment. She said she wanted things to go back to normal. I said, Mom, I want to move forward too. But things going back to normal means going back to a situation where you and Dad felt comfortable taking my property without asking me, because you assumed I would forgive it. I do not want to go back to that. I want to go forward to something different. She was quiet for a long time. What does different look like? She finally asked. It looks like you asking me before making decisions about my life. It looks like me saying no sometimes, and that being okay. It looks like Felicity being held accountable for the things she breaks, instead of everyone else covering the cost. Another long pause. That sounds very cold, she said. It sounds like respect, I said. We did not resolve it in that phone call. I did not expect to, but I said what I needed to say, and I said it calmly, and I did not apologize for it. And that felt, in its own quiet way, like another kind of victory. Felicity and I have not spoken since the courthouse steps. I do not know if we will. I do not know what a repaired relationship between us would even look like, or if I want one badly enough to do the work of building it. What I know is that I am 30 years old, and I am not going to spend the next 30 years managing the consequences of her decisions. There is a version of this story where we reconcile, where she apologizes genuinely, and I forgive genuinely, and we figure out some new version of sisterhood that is healthier than what we had before. I am not close to that version, but I am also not waiting for it. I am living my life. And here is the thing. Nobody says out loud about family betrayal. The grief is real, even when you do everything right. Even when you win the legal claim and get your car back in perfect condition and establish healthy new boundaries. You still grieve the family you wanted to have. The mother who would have knocked on your door, the sister who would have called and asked, the relationship where trust was a given instead of something you had to legally enforce. That grief is legitimate. You are allowed to feel it and also move forward. Both things can be true. I want to tell you something that I have thought about a lot in the months since all of this happened. Something that I think is the real lesson underneath the drama and the legal filings and the court judgment. For 29 years, I was what my family called the stable one, the responsible one, the one who had her act together. And I was proud of that identity, genuinely proud, because I had worked hard for it. But somewhere along the way, the stable one became code for something else. It became code for the one who would handle it, the one who would cover it, the one who would not make a scene, would not ask for too much, would not enforce consequences because she understood that family was complicated and that sometimes the responsible thing was to just let things go. And the problem with always letting things go is that it teaches the people around you exactly how much they can take. Not because they are monsters. Most of them are not monsters. Most of them are just people who have learned, over years and years of small tests, where your limits actually are. And if you have spent years not enforcing your limits, they have learned that your limits are not real. They are suggestions, or they are starting points for negotiation. They are things you say, but do not actually mean. My parents did not go to my parking lot at 11 o'clock at night because they were cruel. They went because they had learned, over decades, that I would handle it, that I would be upset, and then I would calm down, and then I would let it go. Because I always let it go. Because that was what the stable one did. The most important thing I did that morning was not call the police. The most important thing I did was decide, standing in that empty parking space with the cold October air on my face, that I was no longer going to be the person who absorbed the cost of other people's choices. That decision was expensive. It cost me comfort and ease and the warm fiction of a family that was more functional than it actually was. It cost me weeks of anxiety and sleepless nights, and an afternoon in a courtroom that I never wanted to see the inside of. But what it gave me was something I did not realize I had been missing. It gave me the experience of being someone whose limits were real. If you are watching this right now, and somewhere in this story you recognized yourself, the one who always handles it, the one who always absorbs, the one who is told they are being dramatic when they simply want to be asked, I want you to hear this. Setting a boundary is not an attack. It is information. It tells the people around you what you are and are not willing to participate in. It is not cruelty. It is not jealousy. It is not you being the difficult one. It is just you, finally, telling the truth. My car is paid in full. The payments cleared last spring. I own it outright now. The car that was taken from me and returned to me and repaired and made whole. I drive it every single day. And every time I put it in reverse and back out of my parking space, I think about that empty concrete rectangle on that cold October morning. I think about the version of myself who would have called my mother back and apologized and told her she was right and figured out how to get to work on the bus while Felicity drove to Atlantic City in my car. That woman would have convinced herself it was the loving thing to do, the family thing to do. But love is not the same as erasure. Family is not a synonym for unlimited access to your resources. And the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and sometimes, for the people around you, is refuse to participate in the fiction that everything is fine when everything is very clearly not fine. I hope Felicity is doing well. I genuinely mean that. I hope she finds stability. I hope she finds honesty. I hope she finds a version of herself she can live with. I hope my parents learn to knock on doors before they open them. And I hope, wherever you are watching this from, you know that your limits are allowed to be real. Take care of yourselves out there.